When I was a kid, my dad told us that he had to drop something off at a friend's house. So we were driving along and we pull into the driveway. And something about that moment, I just knew this was his house, that he had purchased this brand new house. And it was supposed to be a surprise for us. But I blurted out something like, Dad, this is your house. This isn't your friend's house. And I think in that moment, his jaw dropped because I was probably, I want to say, like 10 years old. And here I was kind of scooping this big surprise he had for my brother, sister, and I. I don't know how I knew. There's like no logical reason why. It was almost just like a download, and I didn't have the words for it at the time. And it would take me years to get there. But now I know that that was a clear cognizant download, and I knew that I was getting a moment of precognition. But it took me a while to figure that out. That's what this video is about as I sit here drinking lemonade out of an espresso cup I got in England. I love occasions for using beautiful dishes. I'm Emily Snyder, a psychic medium for pets and people, and I love to teach people all about their intuition. And today, right before we start my Intuition for Beginners class, I wanted to walk you through the things that I wish someone had told me before I walked into class the first day. All of the nitty-gritties of the good and the bad and what to expect when you get out of it. This is also a story in what I was already doing but didn't have a name for. So I think I lumped psychic ability, mediumship, intuitive downloads, potentially even healing that I didn't know I was doing into kind of one nebulous category. I didn't know that if there were layers of different things or if they were separate, but I did know that there was energy attached to each of them. I didn't know if I, in particular, had any of these abilities, but some of those moments, like I just told, were repeated throughout my childhood and into my early young adulthood. And I guess I just didn't have the vocabulary for them. So, what I want to do today is give you the reason why the vocabulary matters and what the difference between intuition, psychic ability, and mediumship are. Here's what they actually are and why it matters. Your intuition is your own internal guidance system. It is an all-knowing that comes over you. It is a sensation or a feeling or an emotion that you get as you're asking yourself questions about your own life. It is the thing that sometimes feels like a gut feeling. That is your intuition working. Psychic ability, on the other hand, is reading the energy of the living or a situation around the living. If you sat down with a psychic, you would ask them questions about your life's path, things that were going on in your life, the meaning of them, or even situations of relationships. If you yourself have a psychic ability, sometimes you're able to pick up on the energy of the room or know what's going on with a person before they open their mouth. Mediumship is very specific. For most purposes, it's communicating with loved ones who's passed. If you're speaking to a spirit guide, that might be someone who has passed or someone that was in your life, and so that would also qualify as mediumship. These are all different things, but they pull on that same universal energy. Getting the connection to spirit allows your intuition to work harder, your psychic ability to pick up on everything that's possible, and to connect to loved ones who've passed in your mediumship ability. Here's one thing I want to get across. I had actually been doing all three my whole life without actually realizing it. So that moment at my dad's house, that was an all-knowing download about something in my own life. So my intuition was telling me what was going on. There was also this moment after college where I moved to France thinking I was going to teach English, but it had been kind of a fraught situation. And something didn't sit right with me. The second I actually set foot in the country, I was like, this is not the program for me. I knew I had made a wrong turn and that it wasn't the right move for me because of my own intuition. I also think I was doing the psychic ability thing of reading the energy of the room before walking into it. I had not always the most steady childhood. For anyone who's had a parent who is emotionally up and down, I think a child learns very early on to walk into the room and be able to read the emotionality of that room very easily. So for me, my psychic senses probably started in that way before I even knew how to speak, and slowly over time built and built and built to the point where all I had to do was walk into a room, take a breath, and I could understand how everybody in the room was already feeling. I also talked to my godmother a lot. She was my aunt on my father's side, and she passed when I was 16, and I was abroad and couldn't go to her funeral and had a ton of guilt about it. And so afterwards we talked, and what I thought was just me making it up and having these full conversations with her had been real and validated. So that ability had kind of been trickling along my entire life without actually really realizing that it was real. So, for any of you sitting out there thinking you don't have any of these abilities, I will say your intuition is not built from scratch. You've been using a version of this your whole life. And I guarantee you that most of you out there have a gut feeling about which way to go when you walk down the street, or which job to take, or even something as subtle as I like that person or I don't. So, it's building on that ability that's already in you and just noticing the subtlety of the signs. When I walked into my first class at Arthur Finley, the thing that surprised me the most was that it wasn't about being a better receiver. So if you think about like a radio receiver, it wasn't about turning on the receiving part of that. It was actually about becoming quieter on the inside. The thing that you have to work on is quieting the doubt, the anxiety, the fear. It's also just about quieting that inner dialogue that happens, like the movie plots that are going through your mind, the book you read, the to-do list, what you've got to do tomorrow. All of those things kind of have to be put on hold. And learning to do that in class is one of the hardest but best things to learn to make this ability much, much easier. The difference that you feel in the signal will actually be about how much you're able to still and quiet the internal monologue so that you can hear the subtlety of the message from spirit. So let's address that head on. The second surprise here is just how subtle that message can be. I think I thought early on that I was going to get these profound downloads, these dramatic, vivid pictures being given to me. What I got instead was really small. A few words, an image, sometimes a feeling in my body that was fleeting, that would come in and leave within a few seconds. That feeling would arrive without like a fanfare. It wasn't like a big parade coming through. And if I started to second guess it, it would disappear immediately. Learning to trust kind of that first subtle sign that came in without second guessing it felt absurd at first, almost like that's the message, just that tiny little thing I felt or saw or heard. I couldn't believe it. So then what really started to change everything was partnered exercises. So that first class at Arthur Finley, I was paired up at least twice a day. And then something happens in those partnered exercises in class where you're sitting across from someone and you're giving readings back and forth, and they're telling you that the information is valid or invalid based on whatever you're getting, and vice versa. The first time someone said yes to me repeatedly in a reading, I think it reset my nervous system. I would say it was almost like my body had the confirmation. I felt it, and so then I was able to trust it more than just on an intellectual level. The third surprise was being in a room with teachers and students who were way ahead of me, and they were describing things they had seen or felt, and they were resonating with me. You don't need permission from me or anyone else, but there's something about having those quiet sensations confirmed by somebody who's wiser that is just so profound and changes your development. And that's where I learned that the fastest way to developing your own intuition was not to do it alone, but instead to work with partners and receive validation from others about the information you're getting, but then also to work as a group and use the information that's being shared to help you along on your own individual path. The thing that surprised me, though, was that my mediumship came first. I think I thought that you start with yourself and then you move on to psychic ability and then you move on to mediumship. And it should follow this like staircase or this pathway and be very organized. But for me, what actually came first was mediumship. And that conversation with the other side was immediate and vivid and profound. And then I had to work on the psychic ability. I had to work on my own intuition and recognizing those signs in my own body. That took some practice with others and some exercises to really, really stretch to be able to feel the energy of the living in a way that was usable, but also validated by others. I tell you this because if you're thinking there's a correct order to things, but you've been talking to a relative of yours that's passed this whole time, that's not true. You could start with mediumship. You could start with psychic ability. You could tell me all I feel is my intuition, but I also talk to my dog all day long, which is a psychic ability. You just start where you are and you go from there. All right, I'm sitting here in my living room and I want to tell you this funny story about spirit and the thing that surprised me the most. So it's 2 a.m. I'm here. I'm sitting over on my couch, which is just across from me. And I'm having one of those insomnia moments of just, I can't fall asleep. And then kind of my mind is spinning and I still can't fall asleep. And I'm afraid I can't fall asleep and worrying about the next day, all the things that happen. I was teaching a class at the time and we were doing a claircognizant download, which is essentially saying, what is one thing I need to know today? And repeating that exercise every single day for a month. What that does is it kind of helps you refine those abilities and that subtleness of your intuition. And so here I am, it's the middle of the night and I can't sleep. And I think to myself, well, it's 2 a.m., it's tomorrow. Let me do my claircognizant download for today. So I tap into spirit and I say, okay, what's one thing I need to know today? And the thing that came back was garbage trucks aren't real. I was like, garbage trucks aren't real. That can't be the thing. So I connected again to spirit. We did it. And I just heard garbage trucks aren't real. And so I'm laying there and I'm like, okay, I don't know. I must be out of my mind. And then I hear, this is the funniest part, real garbage trucks outside my window driving by at like 2 o'clock in the morning, being very, very loud. And I hear then in my spirit brain, just laughter. Like, we're trying to get you to laugh. We're bringing humor into this situation. Isn't it so funny that we can tell you that garbage trucks aren't real? I don't think I can tell you what it means. I don't even know if it means anything. But what I can tell you is I was alone in the middle of the night and spiraling to a place of like, I can't fall asleep. I can't fall asleep. And that message took me completely out of my mindset. And I sat here laughing. That energy changed the mood for me. It changed the room's energy. Eventually, I did fall asleep and I woke up the next morning and I just wrote it down and was like, what is going on? And it took me a couple days to process. But what I do know is that spirit is funny. There's joy in this work. As I said, I think I thought I was going to get these profound downloads, but sometimes it's just a joke. That's the point. The point is the laughter, the joy, and the love. This work can be profound. I'm not dismissing that, but it can also be ridiculous. And the more you open yourself up to the range of emotions that come through, the better and more vivid the experience will be for you. Now let's talk about the fear. I walked into Arthur Findlay the first time, and it is a stately place. It's a manor home in England with its stately outside gardens, all the things. And it's a little intimidating to walk in the front door. My internal monologue was not very great in those moments. What have I done to be here? What if I get it all wrong? What if I walk into the room and everybody can see that I don't belong here? But I'll share with you what actually happened. I received confirmation that every single thing that I was seeing, hearing, and feeling was real. I had a profoundly life-changing experience while I was there. And I'm not saying that one class will do the same for you, but it will shift your mindset. It will change the way you approach this world. And I remember my tutor saying to me, hey, at the end of this, re-entering the real world is a little tough because you've been here for 7 days. You have marinated in this energy. You have learned things about yourself, and it may be very difficult to shift back. And she was right. It is a profound transformation when you realize this communication with spirit is real, that your intuition is guiding you, that you can speak to loved ones who've passed, that your dog here in the room has something to say to you and you can hear them and change your behavior. There's a lot to be said for all of those things. So with that, I would just say the fear of stepping into it can be overcome by the outcome of what you learn. My intuition for beginners class starts in just about a week. It's exactly for the person that I was, someone who had been feeling, seeing, and hearing things, but didn't have a name for them or a framework for how to use them. And for someone who wants to finally understand it so that they can connect to themselves and their own intuition on a deeper level. We have all the things that I just talked about. Those partnered exercises are done with people who have the same amount of fear and anxiety that you do, but are willing to just walk with you through this work so that you both come out on the other side knowing more about yourself and the work. All the links about my class information is below, but what I really want to know in the comments is if you've had one of those instances where something happened to you that feels like coincidence or an all-knowing sensation and you just don't have a name for it, drop it in the comments and we'll work through it together. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you again soon, maybe in class. Again, I'm Emily Snyder of Connected Intuition. Stay open, stay curious, stay connected with Connected Intuition.